Hello and welcome everybody to New Earth Consciousness. Tanya here, and I'm with Em Stawicki, who is a psychic medium, and her website is emstawicki.com. And so I'm excited to dive into her story and how she helps people. Em, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me. It's amazing to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation. So, so tell us about how you how you found out about your gifts.
Yeah, okay.
Your
So
personal journey.
yeah, my journey. So yeah, I work now as a professional psychic medium, but it wasn't always that way. I've had lots of muggle jobs along the way. So I suppose if I really think back, I always knew that I had weird things happen to me or things that I kind of couldn't explain. And if I go all the way back to being 16 was the first time that I had a experience with spirit that scared the bejeebers out of me, that
Mm,
made me kind of then shut everything down. And this is a very, very common thing that happens to a lot of people who are connected in that way. We're all connected in some way, of course, but who are more aware of that. But really, it didn't come fully into my awareness until the passing of my dad, which was quite a traumatic event for me, being all the way over the other side of the world. Here I am in Australia, that's where I'm
mhm,
talking to you from.
mhm.
And my dad was in Germany. And, I got the call that, we never want to get, but will come at some point in our life was probably a little bit early for me because my dad was only 69, so I wasn't really expecting that.
Mhm.
And then making the journey to the other side of the world and not arriving in time and not really getting that goodbye, not having
Mm,
that closure that comes with,
yeah.
seeing someone before they pass. And that's when I started to have lots of experiences, which became, I guess, unable to ignore or to make sense of or make logic fact around,
Mhm.
which I had always kind of done with these experiences. Yeah,
Oh,
so that's kind of how it all
how
blew up, I guess.
started. It's interesting to me though how sometimes, because I had another interviewee on here who hers was more traumatic in the sense of, well, I shouldn't quantify that. It was traumatic. She lost her son to murder,
Mhm.
actually. And
Yeah,
but what it did is it blew her open to
yeah,
the communication in the unseen world. And so it's just
yeah,
interesting to me how sometimes trauma or any kind of big, like,
yeah.
kind of slap in the face, or I don't know what you want to call it, that suddenly it just breaks you open into
Yeah.
um, these spaces that maybe we've either closed ourselves off from, right? And
Mm.
it just kind of reopens that, or it just changes something in our mind, body, spirit connection that allows us to tap into something else.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I agree. Like most people that I work with who then start to tap into their spiritual abilities, it happens for them in that way through trauma or through like acute loss,
A
like
loss.
you have just mentioned. Yeah. And I actually believe I mean, obviously everyone calls it, or in the space, it's called a spiritual awakening. That's kind of how it's
Mhm.
labeled, I guess. But for me, I actually think it's a remembering. I agree with what you said first, which was, is it actually more that we are now becoming more aware of something that we've closed, or is
Mhm.
it something new? And for me, I truly believe it's actually more of a remembering. And the reason is that most of the time we are raised with a lot of conditioning. So we take on that conditioning, obviously, from our parents, our caregivers, And then those who will awaken will then become more aware of what they already knew, like
Hmm.
a remembering. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, super interesting. And so I guess so you had this experience and you so describe to us like what are some of the gifts that you have discovered that you have?
So I guess it's for me, when I was experiencing things in my everyday life that were unexplainable, things, little things like, you go look for something and it's not there and you look everywhere, but then you come back and it's where you originally looked. And then you're kind of thinking, oh, I must have missed it, or I must have, those sort of things started to happen to me a lot. I was becoming aware of like visitations from people, aware of almost like knowing someone's walked in the room, but they're not there. But
Hmm.
having that energy of going, I can feel a presence with me, but there's not someone physically here with me. And the biggest experience I had when the passing of my dad and I arrived in Germany. I found out that obviously he had passed. I was in the airport, and in all fairness, I was alone. I was alone. I was ringing my husband. He was in bed. It was overnight. It was fairly kind of traumatic, and I think also because we didn't have I guess we didn't have the best relationship, right? He didn't show up for me as the dad that I needed. And there was a lot of things that I was actually angry. And a lot of people, think when someone passes that you shouldn't feel angry.
Hmm.
And that I think that's what took me down the rabbit hole, because I was angry and there was lots of things I wanted to say. So I started to say them, to talk out loud, to try and
Hmm.
express them. And then when I was actually at his home, so a few hours I was on the airport floor, paralyzed, couldn't get up, couldn't do anything. And I had to then get in a car and drive 2.5 hours by myself on the other side of the road to get to, where he lived. And the experience that happened to me in the days after that
Hmm.
were big experiences. And one of those things that I've talked about is how there was a huge wind chime in the corner of the guest room in his house. And I had been sitting there for a few hours. I was reading, I was by myself, the doors were closed. And then all of a sudden, the wind chime started to make this like tinkering noise, like there was a draft. And my logic, your logic brain
Yeah.
goes, oh, yeah, there's a draft or something. But
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, this wind chime literally just went crazy. Like the whole
Wow.
thing, like someone had took their finger and
Wow.
wrapped it all the way around, and the
Yeah.
whole thing, the noise, everything. And I think that moment for me was that moment that I realized that that was my dad's way of telling me that he was there
Yeah.
and that he knew I was there as well. And it was so peaceful that the anger and all of the things that were going on in me just seemed to settle.
Yeah.
Like I seem to, oh, I feel emotional talking about it, but like because I
Yeah.
can feel it. Like I
Yeah.
actually, if I take myself in that moment, I can feel the feeling and the emotion of that moment, and knowing then that this was real. This experience was something I was making up, something that I could make sense of. I just had this inner knowing that this was a communication from the other side. And my dad was the biggest atheist ever. Like the last
Yeah.
person in the whole world
Yeah.
that would believe in this crap,
Totally.
literally would not have been him. And I knew in that moment that because that happened and because he had that belief, that it just, like you said, it blew me open and sent me on this huge journey of
Wow.
awakening. Yeah,
So
so
it's
amazing.
so interesting how when people cross, like the different ways that they can show up or make themselves known. I remember a friend of
Yeah.
mine sharing a story where one of her good friends had passed away, and all of the lights in the house were just flickering, flickering on and
Yeah.
off and on and off. And I remember when my grandmother died, she was really my favorite, grandmother, favorite, yeah, favorite, one of my favorite people, really.
Mm.
I just felt so close to her. She passed in her 90s. It was her time. Um, but I remember it might have been that night or the next night. I remember I was in my bathroom cleaning, and I heard this voice inside my ear that went, cochina.
Mm.
And so cochina, what that means in Spanish is, dirty little pig or something like that. And that was something that she used to call me, cochina, whatever. And I was like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't a word, that word I had not thought of in
Yeah.
decades. So it was like, that was definitely not me. That wasn't my mind
Yes.
contemplating my grandmother. That was like this communication. And
Mm.
I was like, whoa, I was like, that's amazing. And I mean, I haven't had any big communications with her since, but there is, I feel like when a person is dying, those first few days, weeks,
Mm.
it's like they're going around and they're visiting everybody, kind of like
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
goodbye, kind of observing.
Yeah.
They leave and
Yeah.
go on to their next adventure. Yeah.
That's right. And a lot of people have a misconception that, when people pass, it takes a certain length of time to communicate with them, to,
Mm.
even going to mediums. Some mediums may say that. It's not in my belief system. Like I've communicated with people literally like that have just passed, and for other people who have just passed as well. And your loved ones, when they pass, they're not anywhere else. They're with you. They haven't gone anywhere. They haven't gone to a special place. They stay with you. They stay within your or like auric field.
Right.
Your energy field. That's where they are.
Definitely.
Um, yeah, a lot of people
Definitely.
think they're gone, they've gone somewhere else, or when they come to see a medium, they're like, can you find them? Can you connect with them? And, I'm like, they're with you. They're not with me. They're only with me when I'm with you, you know,
Right.
and when I'm connecting in, to them for you. And that's what a lot of people struggle with when they lose someone, right? Because the word lose, it's like they're gone. They've gone somewhere,
Oh yeah,
but they
our
haven't.
right, our language around death is so interesting, really.
Yeah.
Just that
Yeah.
it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, they're, you've exactly like you just said, oh, you've lost
Yeah.
someone, or even that they've died. It's like, well, not really. They've just changed form. Like, why don't we call it something else? Like, you know, they've
Yeah.
transitioned into they've had their transition day or whatever. I don't know. Like, it just seems like it's so interesting that we have this word death, because
It's just
really,
such a final, it's just got such a final energy attached to it, isn't it?
yeah,
And we talk about, there's lots of words that, we can talk about where they have an energy attached to them, but they're just a word. But we've created an energy around that word that signifies something, and certainly death just has like a finality to it when, like you said, it isn't. They've just transitioned into their next journey,
right,
right? They're just not in a physical body anymore.
yeah,
But you can have experiences where you have, sorry, as I mentioned before, the feeling that someone's in the room with you, and then you turn around, like, sometimes even if I'm home with the kids and I think one of the kids has walked into the office and they're here, but I turn and they're not. And I'm like, oh, who's here? Because I can feel the energy change in the room. And, you know, a lot of people struggle with that when they lose someone because they're like, we've not had these experiences, or we haven't heard from our loved one, like you mentioned, like, grandma coming through hearing her, but I haven't had any experiences with her since.
mhm,
Sometimes we don't need it and sometimes we do need it. And a lot of the reason why, people might not feel their loved one around is because often they're in heavy grief. And, especially as you mentioned, I also have a friend who lost her son in an accident, right? And,
Mm,
we're so deep in that grief
mm.
that that frequency can't reach us. But I want people to know, if you're listening to this, it's not that your loved one's gone anywhere. It's just at the moment, the frequency is just not quite matching in order for them to be able to get that message to you.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing, this the process of leaving the body and our connection with those people. Um, I remember my mother's second husband passed away, and he was my stepdad from age 18 till when he passed away, maybe, gosh, I don't know how long it's been, maybe 5 years ago, 3 years ago, I can't remember. Anyway, what I wanted to say about that was, they ended up divorcing later, like as I was well on to into my 40s, and we kind of became estranged, It was kind of like, yeah, we just became estranged, like for whatever reason. And when he passed away, I didn't have any real deep feelings of grief or sadness, which was interesting to
Mm,
me, right? I mean,
mm,
that can happen too. And so, but
yeah.
what was really fascinating was about, um, gosh, I really think it was only a couple of weeks ago, I had this dream about him. And in this dream,
Mm,
he shows up and he's just looking at me and just like peering into my soul, kind of a thing, like just looking deep into my soul and just like deep acknowledgement. And then he walked
mhm,
into the light. And I don't know, and after that dream, I just remember finally my heart being open, being able to open to receive the love that was there, right? And
yeah.
broke me open, and finally the tears could come because it was like, there is a lot of, you know, good things that he did in my life, and good memories, and whatever was
Mm,
between him and my mom was between them, um
yeah.
and things just evolved as they did. But to know that, I mean, it was just surprised me that was
Hmm.
there. And so I think it's kind of a mysterious, definitely nonlinear process, right? When someone
Yes.
passes away.
Mm,
Sometimes the
yeah.
grief might not show up until months, weeks,
Yeah.
maybe years later.
And it's an important thing to talk about, isn't it? Because, we read in the media and in all the things, that, oh, this person's that, and they've just lost a loved one, or this, that person, how can they, maybe a lot of the time as well, like if you've lost a partner and then someone dates quickly, it's like, oh, that's not enough time. Like they have
Mhm.
to,
Mhm.
there's such a stereotypical thing around grief and the grieving process. And it's really important that everybody knows that their process is their process.
Mhm.
You go through, like you just said, obviously there was something maybe that was blocking you, between that needed to be reconciled, that
Mhm.
was reconciled in the unconscious mind, right?
Yeah.
Because, consciously I didn't reconcile that, but on a soul level, your
Yeah.
soul, reconciled that with him in that way
Yeah.
to allow that merging of what needed to happen for you, allow you to then probably release whatever you were holding.
Yeah.
um and I think this is the thing as well. Nobody knows your story. Nobody knows, other people's stories, and we shouldn't judge how people are grieving or how they deal with that process, because everybody is very different in how it works for them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think there's something like in my experience with my stepfather, and this is something I believe to be true. Just like with your dad, you said that he wasn't
Mhm.
the greatest and this and that and the other thing. We have this personality sleeve, right? It's like it's like, I don't know, it's like it can really cover up our true essence, right? Like we're
Yeah,
carrying our
definitely.
traumas and our story
Hmm.
and our identity and all of our shortcomings. But I feel like when someone dies, it's like they're finally freed from that. And at least my
Yeah,
experience with that dream was like I could see him clearly and he could see me clearly without the other drama
yeah.
stuff muck in the way.
Yeah, without the fogginess. Yeah, yeah. And that's the soul to soul connection, isn't it? You know, the soul has connected on that level. Like that's kind of my belief. And all the other stuff is just it's the human stuff, isn't it? It's the human
Yeah,
stuff that clouds everything as well along,
yeah.
along the way. And I like certainly for me, I've been able to probably reconcile my relationship with my dad since he passed, which to me is absolutely crazy if you had asked me that, like back, here, like,
Yeah.
the person who didn't believe in the afterlife, that was very much like, when I'm dead, I'm dead, like I'm living
Right.
one life, I'm living
Yeah,
for
my
me.
grandmother was the same way. She was
Yeah,
total atheist, just like you don't go
yeah,
anywhere. You
yeah.
become nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I think that was the biggest thing that made me realize, because this man that believed all that, suddenly I had this experience and I was like, if he can come and show me that, it's definitely real. It's definitely, it showed me where, also, it showed me where I outsourced, myself a lot as well, where, I'd listen to other people that told me, oh, are you sure? Like, I think that's not real, and all of the things. And interestingly, one of these people is my mum. And it was only 2 years ago now. I think it was maybe 18 months actually ago. She actually said to me, I believe you. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, I never believed you. And I said, hold on, let's just wind back a moment. She was like, when you used to tell me all this stuff, I actually never believed that it was true. I thought you were making it all up. And now I believe you. And like this was literally
Wow.
only about 18 months ago. Like and I've been doing this, this work, and certainly professionally longer than that. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, that's interesting. Right. So it's, it really made me realize when I had this experience where I had allowed myself to be influenced by other people outside of me, and to doubt myself, to doubt that I was having these experiences, to make logic sense of the things that were happening to me. And I have so many stories. Um, some of
Mhm.
them are on my podcast, but that I started to tell because I never, even though they happened to me, there was so many times where I actually wondered whether I was losing my mind, and maybe I was just making it up, or I wasn't having these experiences and my mind was just playing tricks on me,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it definitely I know there's people out there when they go through a spiritual awakening that is definitely a real feeling like I'm losing it, and it
yeah,
can be very unsettling. And unfortunately, in the modern Western culture, we have nowhere to turn, really. I mean, unless
yeah,
you
yeah,
happen to know of somebody like such as
yes.
yourself, or, for me, it was when I was going through mine, it was just really by quote unquote coincidence that I was led to this woman who her name was Mega Mega Mies, and she was a psychic, clairvoyant Reiki healer. And
Mm,
at that time, I'd never heard of anything like that. I'd never really worked with a clairvoyant or a psychic, but it was like working with her was just like, oh, finally, this is making sense, And
yeah,
so it can be very, very unsettling for sure. For
yeah.
sure. So
It,
you really had to
mm.
navigate it on your own then, it sounds like.
Yeah, look, pretty much. And and what was always surprising to me is like my mum comes from a line of gypsies, like with
Ah,
gypsies, and I'm like, okay. But I think that, sometimes that humanness that comes in, wants to fight the part of you that's having these experiences because you don't want to look crazy or weird, or you don't want to get outcast, right? And so you kind
oh,
of keep it to yourself. And I've interviewed a lot of people and I've spoken to a lot of people who have, acute trauma through loss, and they end up medicating because they do feel like they're going crazy, because they are having these experiences, that they are having visitations, that they are having, weird things happen in their home, and they are frightened to verbalize this in case people think that they are, losing their mind and
oh
they're
yeah,
gonna get sectioned. And
yeah.
I have this friend who lost her son, and we talked about that as well in a podcast interview that I did with her, where she was like, I didn't tell anyone, and I actually thought I was losing my mind. And so it's important to talk about this, like you said, because often before you have that loss, if you're not in this space, you have no clue. You don't even know these things actually exist, because you've never been in the frequency of that
Mhm.
happening.
Mhm.
So looking for someone who can support you through that and help you understand, like she said to me, if I had understood that my son could contact me in different ways, and I
Yeah.
knew that, then I would have felt much more at peace than feeling like, gosh, like I'm literally losing it.
Well, and honestly, it's it's a what's the word? It's a oh, I can't think of the word, but it's like psychology, mainstream psychology would have labeled her as losing it. It really is
Yeah,
true. And so,
yeah,
and part of it also, I think too, I think it's in our DNA to not want to open our mouth because we were burned at the stake. You were labeled
yes,
as a witch, and so, or
yeah.
whatever, a threat,
Mm,
blasphemous.
mm,
So there's that going on too at the much deeper
yeah.
subconscious levels. And so, I love that you call yourself a spiritual rebel because really, I mean, religion is probably one of the biggest factors when it comes to people wanting to put their gifts in the shadow,
Yeah,
and turn it
yeah.
off. And I was just talking with on someone on another podcast group in a Catholic family, and he uh, he was psychic, but he like turned it off because in that religion, it's like, oh, you're playing with demons and spirits, you're gonna go to hell, So it's like, oh my God,
Yes.
okay, whoa, I don't want to do that. But then it comes back with such a force that
Yes.
it's really part of who we are. And it has
Yeah.
nothing to do necessarily, I think, like you, and maybe you mentioned it before. Um, there's nothing unnatural about it, I would say.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
so
definitely.
yeah, yeah.
I think that's interesting as well. Lots of people are in what we call the spiritual closet. Certainly that was me for a long time because I was frightened to stand out. And it's taken me a long time to step into even the role of the spiritual rebel. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that would not have been me. That would be me still trying to stay small, still trying to hide in the shadows. And lots of people, especially from religious backgrounds, they are technically what we call in the spiritual closet because they're frightened of stepping into that because they'll be outcast by their family, their community. And so they're having to keep parts of them hidden. And this is the thing, when we start to really deep dive into this stuff, it's, how many different masks we can wear in different situations for, keeping parts of ourselves hidden, and that's a whole other podcast episode. But yeah, I think that being able to step into this role has really been me working on myself and coming more inside than listening to the outside noise of what everybody says being spiritual should be. And I fell into that trap. Like when I really started to do readings professionally, I was reading from like a space here local to me. And I remember having someone come for a reading with me, and she says to me, "You don't look like a psychic medium," because I was like just dressed in normal clothes. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't look spiritual enough, like I don't look woo
Where's your
enough.
crystals and your yeah
Yes. And I ended
thing
up
that
going
you're
down this rabbit hole of buying like this whole other wardrobe that I would like go to this space in, and it would be, that sort of etheric feeling, and like you said, the crystals and the things and the to look the part. Like I started to try and make myself look like I was a psychic medium and fit into this stereotype. And like my kids would be like, "What are you wearing today, Mum?" And I'm like, "Don't worry about it. I'm just going here. Like this is my work clothes for that, right?" And yeah, and then that evolved into me really realizing that that's what was happening. Like I was trying to fit myself into a space and look the part and do the things that made me look like a psychic medium. And when I started to really do some big inner work on myself, like who am I? I'm
Mhm.
like, this is not me. I'm trying to play a role. I'm putting the mask on as the psychic medium of how people see someone or want you to look. And yeah, I had to really dial that back and go, all right, I'm outsourcing too much here. Like I can actually be a psychic medium wearing that's my
Yeah,
normal clothes, right? That
totally.
I'm wearing. And I love a crystal. I love the things, but I'm
Sure.
not, I'm quite a direct communicator person. I'm not someone like I dress very plainly. Like I'm not someone that over fluffs everything and needs all the, bells and whistles. But that's what I was trying to be as a psychic medium. I was trying to do all the things, that people were saying I had to do. And then I realized I could actually be a psychic medium on my terms.
Mhm.
And I love that for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that kind
And
of
then I
points,
stepped into my rebel era.
yeah, and that points to the shadow work, right? Because shadows are interesting, they're the parts of ourselves that um, we want to deny and not look at. And, it's I think it's so important to look at and integrate those shadows so we can really fully be ourselves.
Yeah,
I'm
so
curious,
important.
like maybe you can share a story or two about, I don't know, the shadow work that you do with your clients and what you've come to discover.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And within my Mediumship Academy, even though we are learning techniques and mechanics of mediumship, it goes hand in hand with the inner work.
Hmm.
I have a saying which is, or an analogy, I do love a good analogy, but a good analogy, is a little bit like, if you can be the best medium, like you could be the best singer, you could have a singing teacher, you could have a beautiful voice working on that. But if you have stage fright and you can't get up and share those beautiful gifts and your voice with other people, you've
Hmm.
got the wrong problem, right? And so many people are seeking, more certificates, more training, over and over again, doing multiple courses in the same thing. And
Yeah.
it's not that they need to know more about that. It's actually that they're not doing this bit. They're not doing the stage fright bit. They're not working on their own nervous system,
Hmm.
right? And their own inner um shadows, if that's what we want to call it, right? The own inner shadows, and it's stopping them. And this is not just mediumship, this is across the board. This is
Yeah.
for a lot of people who have amazing abilities in all walks of life, but they never share them because they have this imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. Like, what if I get it wrong?
Yeah.
A lot of this shadow work, I think for me, definitely nervous system regulation is 100% the key to a lot of stuff. A lot of us are living in fight, flight, fawn
Yeah.
responses, right? In the parasympathetic, because we are reacting or disengaging from our environment depending on our developmental, upbringing. And that's very different for everyone
Mhm.
in how that worked out, how you were raised, what the beliefs and patterns are in your own family, because it's passed down the lineage, right? And, I guess with my students, I do a very array of things in there. But if the one thing that you could take away is working on your own nervous system response versus reaction. And honestly, this has been the biggest piece for me,
Mm.
is not only in my work, but also in my private life, in my home life, with my children. It brings in a calmness that I grew up in chaos. So I grew up in a, quite a volatile household.
Mhm.
There was physical volatility,
Mhm.
as well as, you know, other stuff that went on there. And what really happened was that I realized that through the work on myself was that I would emotionally monitor people. So I would, for safety, I would have to monitor where everyone was, which
Mhm.
kept me in that kind of heightened state all the time
Mhm.
to know whether I was safe or not.
Mhm.
So really going deep dive into looking at the root causes of that and somatically releasing that from the body 100% was the key for me to
Yeah.
get where I am right now. And
Yeah.
I do that work because I am practitioner trained as well in that work, and breath work as well, is just really learning about what is your own frequency? Where's your baseline? Because if you don't know where your own baseline is, how do you know when you're connected to spirit? How do you, you know, move through experience and all this other stuff if you don't know where your own baseline is?
Mhm. Yeah. That embodiment piece, and I totally know what you're talking about. I think those of us that are were born as sensitive children and maybe, sensitive, empathic, and if we
Yeah.
were in an environment where it was like we just felt unsafe, yeah, I did the same
Mm.
thing. I was
Yeah.
always reading the room, reading the energy of the
Yeah.
room. And I
Mm-hmm.
could not handle if there was, I mean, even into my adulthood, I remember sitting it was a teacher's meeting, and there was
Mm-hmm.
some kind of conflict going on between one teacher and the faculty of the school. And I remember the discussion started to get heated.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I was sitting next to another woman next to me. We kind of looked at each other, and she's like, "Here, you want some of this?" And she passed over like a Bach flower rescue remedy spray for me because I was just like, I can't handle, like, the energy is starting to get too intense in here. Like,
Yes.
I don't want to be here. Like, it just feels unsafe. And, it
Yeah.
was just so, it
Yeah.
was, when I look back on it, I laugh.
I used to
But
live on
it's,
that stuff.
I know, right? I need
I'd
a
have
martini.
the
Just give me
I'd
some
have the
Bach flower.
gummies. Yeah. I'd have the gummies. I'd have the spray. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I'm hearing you.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and so and so it's interesting how that ability to scan really becomes quite a skill in a lot of ways. Like, I know we've mastered that ability, but it's so
Yeah.
true that if that's what you're always doing, yeah, you're right. You never know what your own baseline is. You don't know
Yeah.
where
Because you're
center is.
enmeshed, aren't you? You're kind of enmeshed with other people's energy. And, as you mentioned, as empaths, we go around and we pick up everybody's energy as we go. Like you 100%, I'm guessing you would have had the same, but I would have situations where I'll be totally fine. Someone walks in the room, like my husband comes in, he's
Oh,
like this, and then all of a sudden I feel the same, right? It like your energy enmeshes. So learning your own baseline, your own frequency, and being able to identify when something isn't yours,
absolutely.
when something's not yours. So now I help my students as well to understand, like, okay, is this your piece or have you picked this up? And I always use that analogy, isn't it? It's like, have I walked around and have I just picked up somebody else's
Mm.
crap?
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And when I recognize, oh, actually, I realize I've just done that, maybe that isn't mine. And it's the awareness of that. It's not going, oh my God, I've done that again, or oh crap, or whatever, or calling ourselves out. It's actually bringing into our awareness that I've actually realized I've just picked this up and actually it isn't mine. So I'm just going to pop
Yeah.
that back down
Yeah.
there, you know?
Totally.
I'm just going to put that down and I'm just going to go, actually, I'm praising myself now because instead of getting enmeshed in that, and involved, I've actually been able to identify that this is not my piece now and put this down. Like I have teenagers. I've got three of them. Well, one of them's 21, so strictly she isn't a teenager.
Yeah.
But they're all at home. They all have different personalities, so, I now when one of them wants to kind of vent or they're expressing, like
Yeah.
old me needed to fix all that because old me as a child had to make sure everybody was okay, check on everyone and fix the things.
Hmm.
So this version of me, even at 52, is learned. It's taken a while, right? The last few years to understand that I am allowed to step back from that because they are having their experience that they need to learn from. And it's not my role to fix them.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's actually quite a beautiful, as a parent as well, it's actually quite a beautiful space to be in because now they're leaning as well. And I'm like, oh, maybe you need to see if there was a lesson in there, or maybe there's something that you need to know about that situation. So instead of trying to fix it,
Hmm.
I'm it's get curious.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things I say. You know, when something happens, if you can pause for a moment and say, that's interesting, is always the first thing I like to say. Hmm, okay, that's interesting that that just happened. And then the next thing I think is, let's get curious. What might I need to know about that? Like yesterday, I did a session with my students, and it was a practice session, and two girls that came into the room, both of their audio wasn't working. So their mic was on, their mic said they were on, but they couldn't be heard. We couldn't hear them. We tried all the things that you do, tech things, couldn't hear them. And I was like, this is interesting. Why is the field shutting your voice down at the moment?
Hmm.
Let's get curious about, do we need to know something about that? So for me, everything is feedback.
Yeah, it's true.
Everything's feedback.
Everything is a reflect. I mean, if we're creating our reality, all those things are true. And it's true. It's like technology can be an interesting mirror when it comes to things like that, where it's like, oh, this isn't
Mm,
working, or oh, my internet suddenly, or I can't get on, or it's like,
yeah,
okay, well, what's in your field that you're
yeah,
unknowingly maybe broadcasting, and
yeah.
shift your energy, shift your
Hmm.
intention.
Mm.
Yeah, it's
And yeah, definitely everything's a mirror back, isn't it? I think to have a look at. And that's something that I learned through my own journey and having a mentor as well. The biggest thing that I ever did was to take a mentor to help me understand what was happening to me, how I could use these abilities, how I could cultivate them, and have someone else support me through that as well and on that journey. So, you're not feeling so alone.
Right.
right? Because a lot of people do feel really isolated when all of this stuff starts to happen. Maybe in their community, they don't have people that they can be honest with and share that with. So it's about finding, a safe space where you're understood and, people are going on the same journey. And that's what I love about creating that space for people as well.
Yeah. Beautiful. So yeah, on that note, share with the audience like what do you have to offer right now? How can they connect with you and work with you?
Yeah, definitely. So my Modern Mediumship Academy is, I guess, my space for all of my work. And it's really for curious people who are awakened and, they're spiritually curious. They, may already know that they can communicate with the other side, or they are looking for some, easy structure. And I have a number of pathways that you can work with me as well in yeah, but just learning more about your mediumship. And it's also, I have a program for professional mediums who really want to come in and start professionally reading. And it's very different to traditional mediumship. So I call it modern mediumship.
Mm.
And it's really about cultivating your own unique ability. As we said earlier, everyone has their own unique abilities and experiences in their life. Nobody is you, and you are no one else. And it's about cultivating that through your mediumship development, not trying to put you in a box of having to follow rules, rituals, and those kind of things to step into being a really heart-led and healing medium.
Yeah, beautiful. And thank you so much for spending time with me and the audience. And yeah, just appreciate you. And also, just to let the viewers know, please share this with anybody with whom you think this would resonate for, and like, share, subscribe, all those things.
Yes.
And yeah, thank you again so much. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure.
you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I've really loved our chat.
Yeah,
Thank
great.
you.
All right. Bye, everybody.